Hi, everyone. We are about to start, and I am Catherine McGill, and I am the moderator for this session. And I have the privilege of introducing Jane Fish. For Jane, plants and growing them has been a lifelong passion. Jane's backyard, once home to fruit trees, play equipment, grass, and native trees, was repurposed in 2002 to build a tranquil, beautiful daylily display garden filled with all seasonal perennial plantings. That decision has evolved to become an official American Hemerocallis Society display garden featuring 700 labeled daylilies, masses of companion plants, and hybridizing program yielding really exciting kids, sharing in all it brings. If you have any questions throughout the talk, please type them in the chat room and we'll try to get to them at the end of the presentation. This session is being recorded and will be available online for 6 months. It's my pleasure to introduce Jane Fish, who is a hybridizer, judge, and exhibitor, and will be speaking on the topic of exploring daylilies, pollen on pistil. All yours, Jane.
Thank you, Catherine. Welcome to the presentation today. I just realized that I have a technical issue. I can't see my notes. Can anybody get me past that?
Right. What we could do is, if you're okay with everyone else seeing your notes when you're presenting.
I'm sorry?
If you're all right with everyone else seeing your notes when you present, you can hit the escape key on your computer, and then we can go back to the view we were at before.
I didn't really want everybody to see my notes.
Or if you had, do you have two monitors with you, or is it just the one?
No, I just have the one I'm using. I thought that I wonder if I clicked on the wrong, I don't know. Could I bring it up again?
Yeah, sure.
So I just escape here?
Yep.
Now I'm looking at the one I want. Why are you not?
Yep. So now we're seeing the one with the notes, just like you are seeing the one with the notes.
Okay. So we can't get rid of that.
I don't think we can unless there was a second monitor.
All right, then I'll just go with it like this. That'll
Okay.
keep me
Sure.
fluid, if that's all right. I'm sorry to have interrupted the whole thing. For those of you who were watching, I hope some of you have stayed. So let's go back here. Welcome to Daylily Ensemble Gardens. I'm excited to have this privilege of sharing my garden with so many Ontario gardeners. Here's the property which stirred my garden hopes. The seedling oak is still here. But there have been additions. In 2002, I started digging in earnest, and in 2006, the garden was certified an official American Hemerocallis Society display garden. Its name, Daylily Ensemble Gardens, is meant to reflect the compatibility of all the forms and colors that daylilies offer, combined with companion plants to create visual harmony and hopefully an enjoyable aesthetic experience. I wanted a beautiful, peaceful refuge throughout the gardening season. Why do I grow so many daylilies? Catherine mentioned that there are 700 labeled, and then there are many more because there are seedlings. Daylilies are absolutely reliable plants. They live for decades. They survive all kinds of difficulties. They are drought resistant. They're disciplined in the sense that they create clumps and do not flop over, usually, if you're growing the right ones. And they stay where they're supposed to be and perform. They are a low maintenance perennial. They don't need staking. And if they do, they're not the right variety or the location is too shady. Minimum cleanup for them. In the spring, you scoop up the dead leaves, and they don't need frequent dividing, although eventually the bloom may start to decline. They also offer huge variety. Notice that last huge variety. Currently, there are more than 85,000 registered cultivars. Now, you can't grow all of them, nor can I, because some of them they require a southern location in North America. Even perhaps North America might be too much for them to come here. However, out of 85,000, we still have thousands and thousands of possible choices. Most of you know that daylilies are not bulbs. However, their structure is a bit unusual. Everything arises from the crown. If you'll look at the picture, you'll see that there is a white disc at the base of the leaves and above the roots. That part of tissue is the crown, and everything else grows from the crown. So a fan of leaves without stems, and they are alternate leaves, will come upwards. The bloomscape, which is a stem with flowers, will come straight from the crown, and the roots will radiate from the bottom of it. If you happen to break a daylily you're dividing and you have crown left with either a bit of root or a set of leaves, you can probably get that to grow on. Here's what the seedling looks like. That same seedling looks like from the bottom. That dark spot in the middle of the picture is the bottom of the crown. When you plant this, you ideally want a wide hole with a mound in the center, and the crown will sit on the mound and the roots will radiate out and downward. The crown shouldn't be deeper than an inch. The daylily needs to be close to the surface. How will you choose to achieve your garden goals if you've got all those choices to make? You'll have to decide on form and color, and that's one of the things. These photographs, all pictures from my garden, will show how varied your options can be. Each slide shows 3 different forms. So in this example, the Maymont double is an obvious double. The seedling above it is a regular UFO, which is an unusual form, and we'll get to that later. And the Simply Being Loved pink is the conventional form of daylilies with the 3 petals and the 3 sepals. You're going to see a lot of blooms, and there's one detail that you could miss. In the center of each bloom, you'll see the pistil and stamens, which are important to us later. Try to imagine the bloom without them. They add so much delicacy, and the fact that they mirror the pigments of the petals, for me, is a lovely detail and a little bit magical. They're also ultimately the source of the crosses you will want to make. You can choose from all of those forms to get a very bright garden. You can create a very soft and feminine garden, or you can have a very bold garden. You can find anything you want to make your garden look like you want it to look. And again, these would be visible from a distance. Where can you find the cultivars you want? Well, you research, and that's a good thing for winter work. A complete catalog entry will provide a lot of information, much more than you'll find for many other plants. The final page of this presentation will help with your search in looking for daylily cultivars. Here's a sample of a catalog entry. I chose this one because it has a kind of an amusing name, When Clowns Go Bad. The first thing that's going to show up at the top of the list is the name of the hybridizer and the year that he introduced that daylily. Hybridizer is useful because that will give you information about, when you get researching, information about where this daylily originated. And that's helpful if you need to know if it's going to be suitable for our climate or not. You will find information about height, and that's the height of the flower. And the height can range from short, as in Itty Bitty Gal, which is 12 inches, all the way to Dancing with Giraffes, which is 60. You'll find information about bloom size. Baby Blues is a tiny 3-inch bloom. Neon Flamingo is more than 7 and is a real presence in the garden. People are breeding a lot with larger and larger blooms, and they're just stunning in the garden setting. You'll also find the 3 indicators that you see here: dormant, semi-evergreen, and evergreen. That refers to the kind of growth the plant makes. In our climate, the reliable one is the dormant one, which recognizes that it's a cold winter and that it should just get underground and stay there. The semi-evergreen still struggles to grow a bit and weakens itself somewhat. The evergreens tend not to be able to do very well. They may survive our climate, but they won't thrive. Usually, there are obviously exceptions, but not very many. You will find information about a chromosome count, and the things that will tell you what that is are diploid and tetraploid. Tetraploid daylilies started to be created in the 70s to increase the possibilities of characteristics in daylilies. And they present heavier plants in many ways, thicker tissue because they have more chromosome count. And you may or may not like them better. The diploids have a grace that I really like, and they breed awfully well and produce a lot of seeds when they cross. On all my garden labels, I've indicated a D or a T so that when I go looking to make a cross, I don't do something foolish like try to put the wrong kind of chromosomes on a different kind. Here's another couple of examples. The dip is the Northwind Billy Dew, and the tet is No Boys Allowed. Both stunning daylilies in the garden. I'm going to take you back to that catalog entry. At least I'm going to try to. And I think we're going to manage it. Yes. Now, if you take a look at that, we're down the list. I'm not going to do anything with buds, but you want a good bud count because you want a bloom time that goes for quite a while. And the branching helps with the presentation. It makes the blooms, if it is separated nicely, you'll get a better clump look in the garden. But now we've got to the real nitty gritty of why there's so much variety. This next item, the red purple with dark purple eye above and a green throat, gives you a whole lot of description about the bloom. And we're going to have a look at the possibilities that you might encounter in a catalog. And I'm going to have to go back to here. You'll find indications about form. These daylilies would all be described as single, and they are kind of regular looking in the sense that the 3 petals, 3 sepals present nicely. The color is fairly uniform on them. but there are other forms that you might like more and that you might want to mix with these. The UFOs are of particular interest to me because there's so much variety in them. The descriptions are, there's some vocabulary that's helpful for them. Just wanted to bring that down a little bit. I'm not sure what you're seeing, but the heavenly angel ice is cascading. That would be the term for that, which means that the petals tend to go like flowing water downward. Prague spring is quill. No, it isn't. Prague spring. Lost the word. The petals are connected on a very narrow bit of tissue at the base, and then they form, the word is spatulate. They have a spatulate form. The petal creates a spatula look and has that narrow bit at the base. There's a group called crispates, and they come with a whole bunch of other distinctions. The quilled one, which is Dave Money here, refers to the sepals, which are rolled like the base of a feather. The twisted ones are obvious. They just basically corkscrew. And the pinched ones look like they have actually been folded along the midline of the petal. Another form that you'll find reference to is spiders. Spiders have very long, narrow petals, and for them to qualify for that category, the ratio must be width to length 1:4 or greater. There are things that have spider attached to them still that were introduced before this particular definition was adopted by the society, but now that's what they have to be if you want to register them as a spider. Keep in mind that only 3 of the petals or of the segments are petals, and that the other 3 are sepals in daylilies. You might want doubles, and you can find whatever you want with them. Polymerous daylilies don't always bloom polymerous, but some bloom quite often that way, and that simply means that they'll have an extra petal and an extra sepal in their makeup. So we're back to the catalog entry, and you've mastered all of it right down to the bottom. And you see some things in parentheses there. And for hybridizing, that's an important bit. So in that particular example, look here, Mary times Big Ross will give you information about the parents of the seedling that was involved in this cross. And that seedling, which has been the pod parent, because you see it on the left side of that parenthetical detail. And then the times Furley Bliss shows you what the pollen parent was. And that's how you would always see the parentage for a daylily identified. So all the descriptive details that set the cultivar apart might turn up in that bit of information that you just saw there. So color and its distribution on the flower, the texture of the bloom, the patterning on the bloom. It might have diamond dusting, which you'll see in certain lights, and fragrance, which we cannot convey today. So on color, there are so many possibilities. It could be the color of the petals or the sepals or both. It could be the color of the buds, because some daylilies have unusual colored buds. It might be the foliage. Some can be darker than other, and some may have a blue tint to it. It can be the throat, and we're going to look at some examples of that. Could be midrib, eye, or edge, and we have examples for those things. So here we see the petals and sepals that are all the same color in each bloom. And so that is determined by self in the description. A bitone has a difference in the color between the petals and the sepals. And with the bitone, traditionally, the petals are the darker of those. But you can also have a reverse bitone, in which case the sepals are darker than the petals. You might find a throat that's described as green or yellow or orange. And the midrib, which is that line down the center of a petal, and that one is a very distinctive one. That's you don't miss that in a garden. The midrib refers to that line which divides the petal in two. You might find reference to a watermark, and a watermark will refer to the patch in the middle where it literally looks like the color has been diluted. Here are some good examples of that. I find that particularly attractive myself. You will find reference to eyes that are solid color in all of these examples. The eye being that inner portion of intense color on petals and sometimes on sepals as well. You might find an eye with patterning, and this is an area where many people are trying to push the envelope and get more and more of it happening. The one on the right in my garden blooms absolutely consistently with quite elegant patterning. So it's the most advanced of them that I can show you in the garden. If you see a reference to an etched eye, you're going to be referring to that darker line that looks like it's been sort of penciled in around the eye. You see that. An applique eye looks just like it would in needlework. It looks like a patch that's been applied. So in the center, always, and it's usually a very uniform color. A feathered eye looks like it's had the color kind of brushed out of the eye onto the petals. Lots of vocabulary when you start looking these up. Or you might find a colored edge reference, and often that's paired with the color of the eye, or it can be different, or it can only be there without an eye. So here's some examples of two with eyes that match and one that doesn't have an eye, but just the edging. Or you can have a pencil edge, which is a very fine line all the way around the petals and sepals. Or you can have a very ruffled edge, and people had been in the last decade or more, well, more, I guess, been pushing very hard to get those ruffles wider and frillier. And at some point, many of them are so extreme that they won't open in our climate. They just get stuck on themselves. And obviously those aren't the ones that you really want to grow. So you have to walk the fine line between finding ones that open and look fabulously ruffled and the ones that don't look like much of anything if they won't open. And the other place that people have been doing work is on edges with teeth, and they actually look very ragged, and they have been trying to get them again wider and longer and more pronounced, and there's been a lot of work done there. There are also plants that have the edges described as being knobby, and that would be an example here. This is something that I have liked a lot. There aren't that many of them available, and most of the ones that are evergreens, and I've been determined that I'm going to work on that to some extent to broaden what's available there. So with an edge that's colored, but no eye. You'll find reference to texture. So Mary's baby on the left there has a velvety looking petal, and the absolute 01 is a creped surface. Again, another recent development is in sculpting. So this would be an example you could see in my garden of a sculpted petal with very distinct relief on those. There are also people trying to create more extreme patterning. They're using the streaking and the veining, which is the dark lines on the left-hand one. And the one on the right bottom, you might not be able to tell as well, but that's an area that people have been working on with breaking up color. And so there's a fairly famous one right now that's called Explosion in the Paint Factory, which has very distinct patches of different colors on it. This one has a lot of stippling like a Seurat painting. And diamond dusting, which I finally got a picture to illustrate. It's the sparkle that you get on some daylilies because the light plays on the moisture in the petal cells. It's quite lovely when you manage to notice it. Fragrance, which I can't show you, but is significant if you find it. So now we're back to that bottom line with the parents. The one on the left is the pod parent, in this case an unregistered seedling, and the one on the right is the pollen parent, the male. My goals for hybridizing, and you probably need to establish some because otherwise you'll go down rabbit holes quite regularly. You can anyway, but you might more often. My goals are distinction with beauty. That means it's different from other things in my garden and hopefully in other people's gardens as well. It needs to be able to produce that beauty on most blooms. It can't just do it one time and then look different and less interesting all the other days. It needs an absolutely clear color. I have no tolerance for muddy colors. So, and I'm on my hybridizing field, I'm not seeing any muddy colored, so I seem to have been able to avoid them. I really value a graceful presentation, and that requires good branching and spacing on a well-proportioned plant. That means that the scape needs to rise high enough that the blooms clear the foliage well. It means that the blooms need to be separated out and not clustered and crowding each other. That's important, and I'm not interested in breeding plants that do either of those things, except I prefer them to do the proper things. I want generous bloom, ideally 3 weeks. And I want vigor. I don't want a plant that's not happy in my garden, that I have to feel guilty every time I look at it about wondering if I've given it what it needs, when really all it needs is another climate completely. So earlier I asked you to notice the stamens and the pistil for their aesthetic contribution. Now you're going to see their functional contribution. Here's a bloom, not yet ready to make a cross. There's no mature pollen or fluid at the pistil tip. That's probably early in the morning. Here, an insect has knocked some mature pollen off of an anther, but it's highly unlikely that this cultivar would be self-pollinated because of the length of the pistil. You get insect pollination when the pistil is close to the anthers, and old daylilies, that's fairly common because they're smaller and that part of, there isn't the spread in those plants. But a lot of the new ones have this distinct spacing. And here's one with a ready bloom. It's got golden fluffy pollen and a moist open pistil tip. It's ready. If pollen is deposited on that tip, the fertilization process can begin. Over the next few hours, a tube will develop down to the base of the pistil where the unfertilized seeds await. Very quickly, a pod will begin to develop. Note the paper clips, which create a code to identify the pollen parent, the male. You'll know what the pod is because you're taking it off of a labeled plant, but the pollen can get pretty confusing. So you need to keep track. When the pods start to brown and split, they need to be collected so the seeds are not lost. Seeds need to be labeled and allowed to dry completely. So, hybridizing to create seedlings requires choosing parents, making crosses, and recording them as following. The pod plant, the female, times the pollen plant, the male. And in the case we're going to look at next, it's going to be a plant called Comic Strip was the pod parent, and Heavenly Angel Ice was the pollen parent. Heavenly Angel Ice crops up in a number of these crosses because I got it, a gift from the gods. I got it in a babysitting program and was able to use the pollen on all kinds of things, and it did wonderful things in the garden. A few years later, it actually won the highest award available to Daylilies, which is the stout medal. So now you know all the background stuff. Now we're ready for what if. You like a plant you have, but wish it were taller or had bigger blooms or was happier in our climate. That's when you look around for a partner that might make your goal happen. So here's the partners that I told you about. Comic Strip, the pod parent, is short and a very intense color and an attractive clump. Heavenly Angel Ice, I've already mentioned. It's just a lovely thing to grow. Okay, so the equals at the bottom means I'm going to show you the kids I got. And there are 4 of them that I'm happy with. 2 of them might actually get introduced. And the thing that's interesting to me about them is, obviously you can look back, and I'll show you those others again, just so you can see what the children have picked up from the parents. The 2 on the left are interesting, particularly. They're both picked up the branching and the height of the pollen parent. The one at the bottom left blooms really early, which is lovely. And when it's almost finished, the one above it starts to bloom. So between those 2, I get probably 6 weeks out of them. I'm just going to let you have another look at the parents so you can see the things that got transferred to the kids. Here's another cross. So this one was Siloam Showgirl, which is shorter than Heavenly Angel Ice, and good old pollen contributor Heavenly Angel Ice again. I got that, which I thought was absolutely stunning. Heavenly Angel Ice gave it the form, and it spread out the pigment on the petals so that there's a huge variety there that I think is just exquisite. I'm very happy with that. I'll let you look at the parents again to see how much change there is. And then here's another cross I made. The one on the left was an early seedling of mine, and Jocelyn's Oddity exhibits all that twisting and strange form that I'm attracted to. And when I crossed them, I got these. The one on the left has picked up, obviously, the color from my seedling, only it's made it even clearer color, which I love. And it's picked up the form and altered it. from Jocelyn's Oddity. The other picture on the right is a sibling, which I'm not attracted to particularly because it doesn't have the twisting and it's not as clear an eye color and it's not as big a bloom. So out of that cross, I would definitely keep the left one, but probably I'm still looking at the right one, but I probably won't do anything more with it. Here, another pair. I've got Fountain Tune, which doesn't look like much of anything. It's a very old daylily. And I keep being surprised by what it produced, but it had pollen from Heavenly Angel Ice to work with. So here we go. It produced the biggest variety, I think. I'm only showing you 3 here, variables in the garden. It was not tall. Fountain Tune was not tall. These are all tall. In fact, I think they're all taller than Heavenly Angel Ice. So you've got on the top left, you've got pink sepals. You've got white sepals on the right. You've got more ruffling on some, paler color on some, stronger green throat on some. It's just fascinating what the siblings can throw up. I've encountered another really interesting challenge recently in that I've seen bloom that's from the same clump base that's kind of looking like I've got more, but that's plenty to keep me happy. Out of those, I love the one on the right. It's just such a tranquil, clean looking bloom. And then I'm very fond, as I mentioned before, of the daylilies with an edge but no eye. So Susan Weber would be one of those, and Rose Storm, a double, obviously. So when I crossed those, now I want to put you to work. Try and imagine what might happen when I crossed those. Kind of formulate something in your mind before I show you what actually did happen. Okay. There's what I got. And I think it's quite lovely. I'm very happy with that. I crossed Susan Weber again with good old Heavenly Angel Ice, who's always ready for the challenge. And I got that, which I find dazzling in the garden. And it's got more height than Susan Weber. It's got more branching, broader branching, I think, and quite a different combination of the 2 forms that I really like. And it really stands out in the garden. I crossed Heavenly Angel Ice yet again on Summer Star. I used Heavenly Angel Ice always as a pollen plant because as a babysitting plant, I wasn't allowed to use it as a pod parent. So that's why it's always the pollen parent in these crosses. So what I got here is really long petaled and very, very tall. It picked up height plus from the Summer Star daylily, which was there. And it picked up a lot of interesting form from Heavenly Angel Ice and a softening of the color. Another pair, take a good look at these because what happens is really kind of surprising, I think. Those come from that cross. And they are obviously very, very different looking. Both of them very attractive plants. Both might get introduced, we'll see. Here's another one that I wanted to try. And the result is this absolutely stunning clump, which has everything going for it, absolutely everything. It even has rebloomed for me, which is something that doesn't happen a lot in northern gardens. This cross gave me, take a look and see what the characteristics are that might pass on there. gave me that beauty. Now that doesn't always bloom as extravagantly gorgeous as that, but it's capable of it, obviously. So I've really been happy with that. This cross, you'll notice we've got a couple of mauvey pink differences there. We'll see what happened with that, and form difference. That produced that very interesting looking plant. And I've only seen it in the garden last year in the seedling field. So I'm really curious to see how it develops. That cross, notice I've got an applique and I'm putting it on one without. And it kind of comes up with a very almost blended mix of the two. Now I'm going to show you 4 daylilies that I wish I had done better record keeping with. I do not have parents for these, and that's very frustrating. And when you start, you might not think it's as important as it really is. You need to know what got you where you are. So that one I'd love to know about. That one I'd love to know. It's actually won an award in our club contests. That one would be useful to know. And that one, which has a lovely patterning happening, and I have no idea, because I don't know what the parents were, how to move that forward, except with this particular plant. So here's the seedling field after weeding and mulching, and the same view in June. This week, I'm out there smiling as I walk the rows of blooms that no one else has seen yet. I have to agree that too much of a good thing can be wonderful. There would have been lots to see for actual visits in this morning's garden, and this picture comes from that. Open air and social distancing are easy to provide. There should be lots to see for another couple of weeks. And certainly the garden isn't going anywhere. So anybody who's interested this year or another year would be more than welcome. Thanks for visiting Daylily Ensemble Gardens, and please come again soon. This page provides a link which will get you to all of those bulleted points. So if you had copied down Charlotte's Daylily diary, it's all you need to know. And it's got more information than you've got time to research things about daylilies. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Well, thank you very much, Jane. If anybody has any questions, you can put them in the chat. I have a couple that have come through to me. Do you keep all of your seedlings or just your favorites?
I haven't, am I just speaking now?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. I don't keep anything that's not going to an advanced hybridizing program. So anything that doesn't fit the goals or that I want to watch further is still there. There's been a fair glitch in the development of the program because I've had an incredibly difficult time with deer, which I have only just resolved after about 5 years of total frustration. It got to the point where the deer actually just stripped my garden out so that I didn't see the bloom in the field. So there's no point, I'm looking at just clumps. And in the garden at home, I wasn't able to evaluate them, measure the size of the blooms, nothing. I'm so happy that I finally got control back, but it has made it impossible to know what to dig up and what not to dig up. So I have not done the culling that I would have done if I had been able to do an annual evaluation of the daylilies. So that's where I am with it right now.
Another question is, what is an easy way to remember the difference between a petal and a sepal?
The petals will be on the inside. The sepals will actually be the bud cover. So they will be underneath, they will be layered under the petals when you look from above into the open flower. The petals will also will probably always be bigger.
What is a babysitting plant?
That's part of the Daylilies Society I've actually been responsible for. It's a program that brings plants in that the members then grow for 3 years and see how they do here, because they would bring things from the south and we would be able to determine whether they were worth bringing in, as in, other people bringing in, or whether they are a southern plant and should be left there.
So like a trial bed.
Absolutely, a trial, yes. And at the end of it, if there's been success with the growing, then the person who did the babysitting gets to keep a fan, and the rest of it comes back to the club and is sold or auctioned to support the program, because it's expensive to buy somebody's new seedlings.
Yep. Do you sell your plants?
Yes. When I made the decision to have a display garden, I created a problem for sales for myself, because a sales bed is ideally a plot with lines, and my gardens have no lines, no grid, and I don't have them set out. So what happens in my garden for selling is that people leave orders with me, and if I have enough that I'm able to share them, I'm happy to do so, but I can't do it on the spot. They'll have to take it which traditionally has turned out to be the next spring.
Okay. What was your solution for the deer?
Can I give somebody a promo here?
Sure, plug them.
Deer Fence Canada. The nice gentleman whose name is David gave me all the advice I needed. I've spent incredible amounts of money trying all other kinds of things like sound and electricity and you name it, sprays. And
have you ever tried Deer Expert? No, Hunter Expert.
I live in a city. Are you talking about shooting them?
No, it's a product, Hunter Expert.
Would it be, how do you work? How do you use it?
You spray it on it's a concentrate, you spray it on early spring.
You can stop right there. I've tried 2 different kinds of things that are supposed to be great at repelling deer that are sprays, and I've moved past both of them a long time ago. Because my garden is way too big and it would be just too labor intensive to do it. And I mean, now that I know that the deer fence will do it, I wouldn't even bother trying to do anything else in a big garden.
I was on a tour just last weekend, and she has hostas that she'd never seen bloom in the 6 years because the deer stripped them right down, and tried this. It's a one-time application, and it turns the foliage bitter tasting or something, so you don't have to reapply or anything. And it worked for her.
How big an area was she trying to work with, though?
It's 2 acre.
Okay, a hosta's on all of it?
Pretty much, yeah, from front to back.
Well, then she's more prepared to spray than I am. And I have got a solution that works. And the thing about the deer fence that I put up is that it's not particularly visible.
Okay.
So it doesn't stop the air or the light or anything else or the view.
Okay.
And because I'm on a ravine, the one end of it actually goes down into that and isn't visible at all.
Okay. Well, there was, do lily beetles bother daylilies?
Interesting question, because until this year they had not been on them at all. And this year I have noticed, and I mean, we're talking a lot of years here. This year I had noticed that there have been a few on them. And I don't know if that's because this is such an unusual year for weather and whatever they might be on at the same time isn't blooming for them. Usually the roses, they just cluster on. But so I don't know going forward, and if the weather changes, whether that will become a problem. The lily beetle, I'm talking about the Japanese beetle now. The lily beetle doesn't touch them.
Okay.
It comes and goes before they bloom.
And how long does it take from cross to the mature plant blooming?
Well, if you live in Ontario longer than it does in Florida. And it depends on how much pushing you're prepared to do. If you're prepared to plant your seedlings inside in a greenhouse or something in the first year, you might be able to get them to bloom the next year. Most of us don't. We get the bloom the second year. If you haven't got it by the third year, you might be moving on. And once you've, I have to say that I know there are people who say at the end of a third year, okay, done, and you're out of here. But I haven't obviously had that happening. So I've noticed that there is a maturing process beyond that that is valuable to be able to watch. So I would keep them as long as I could, longer than that, to watch what happens.
Okay. Can you breed unknowns to known and introduce them? Or do you have to know the parentage from both?
No, you can. You can put unknown. There's a lot of unknowns in the databases, or seedling, which you may know. Yes, you can introduce them as long as, I guess, actually, I think you can introduce them regardless. They could both be unknown. Yes.
Cool.
Unless I'm wrong about that. I think that's quite possible.
Well, I think that's all of the questions that have come through.
Okay.
I want to say thank you very much, Jane, for inspiring us in this presentation. So we'll all go out and plant daylilies.
Well, I hope so. I appreciate the opportunity to share.
Thank you very much.